Sex is natural and humans love it. How/why did it become the taboo that it is today? Sex is controlled one way or another in the vast majority of social species. Humans would be quite the exception if we didn't put any boundaries on it. Many social species limit sex to one or a few individuals, from eusocial species like ants with one reproductive female, to herd species where the dominant male mates and excludes other males, who can reproduce with who is typically limited. In species that form pairs, like many birds and some fish, either individual of the pair may cheat or attempt to cheat, and this often leads to conflict between, e.g., resident male and interloper. In some species, mating is promiscuous, which means that any individual in the group can mate with any other individual. Among the great apes, gorillas follow the dominant male model while both chimps and bonobos are promiscuous. So in some sense, you'd expect taboo around sex because most group-dwelling animals have lots of social control around who mates with who, and attempting to mate in the wrong context can get you attacked. To bring it back to people in particular, humans follow all sorts of patterns with regard to mating, but there tends to be quite a lot of social control built up around it one way or another. Humans are a bit unusual among mammals in that males often commit a fair amount of resources to raising their offspring. For them to do this, they need some assurance the offspring is theirs, and that means societal taboos to restrict sex between non-pair individuals. From the woman's side, it can be advantageous to prevent one's mate from fathering children elsewhere who might divert resources away from your own offspring. All these concerns get built up even more in the context of agricultural societies, where marriages are often used to cement alliances between groups. If the marriage breaks down, it could impact much more than just two individuals. From a societal perspective, there's further incentive to build social controls and taboos around sex. Because humans pair bonds so strongly, emotions run high in matters related to sex. That can lead to a lot of conflict over who is sleeping with who, which can in turn lead to injuries, feuds, and deaths, especially in societies without legal systems or strong governments that quash that kind of vigilante action. It's in everyone else's interest that members of society don't go getting in fights or killing each other, and by imposing order you can bring some control to the situation and reduce this issue. To speak on the North American context, I recalled something interesting from a sophomore year undergrad history course. It was about how the Puritan and Protestant roots of the first groups of pilgrims heavily influenced our perception of sex and sexual intercourse. In addition to their persecution in Europe, many Protestants and Puritans believed that the European attitude towards sex was in fact too relaxed for their tastes. A lot of hoity-toity bullshit ITT. Sex is a taboo because it was stigmatized by the Bible/Christianity. Adam and Eve have sex, aka the original sin. Humanity is repenting for the sin of creation, when it could have been them frolicking in the Garden of Eden, blissfully ignorant for eternity. Christianity is pretty popular. Sex is stigmatized in other religions as well, most of them actually. That's the how. Why? Is where you get the longer answers in this thread. I think it's summarized in a few key figures in history: John F. Kennedy, Paris of Troy, Alexander the Great, many others. These are iconic figures who made moronic decisions because of their pursuit of sex: Marilyn Monroe, Helen of Troy, and Cleopatra, respectively. To quote an underrated movie, Youth in Revolt, sex is stigmatized because it's a wonder that humankind has constructed any kind of civilization with this monumental distraction at hand. I think the layman idea is that it's simply old religious nonsense, but that's not questioning far enough, is it? What caused different religions to come up with these rules? I like you/Sensible Madness's suggestions, but I don't think they're complete, so I'm making this a top-level comment. I'm going to go through them in what I think is the order of complexity of thought needed to create such a taboo, from immediate and obvious decisions on an individual level to more abstract and manipulate decisions on an institutional level. Clothes. This is incredibly simple. If you always see people wearing clothes, a naked body is, strangely, different from the norm. It can be exciting and frightening, both to bare yourself and to venture into this unknown world of the other sex. Threat of violence/shunning. In monogamous societies, one common point of all Abrahamic religions, or even other, polygamous societies where there still are conditions, other than basic interest/consent, on who may have sex, not following the rules leads to violence. You may not have sex with the monogamist wife because he thinks of her as property. That holds true even today, with the strange caveat that both parties believe the other to be their property. So, anyone who wishes to have sex sees that there are times when they should not. Threat of disease. In the past, thousands of people have died of STDs like syphilis and now HIV/AIDS. Many others developed conditions which were not deadly, but certainly awful. Having sex with a single person only was a fantastic way, mathematically, of reducing your risk of STDs. Psychologically, it wasn't so perfect, because people often didn't follow monogamous behavior. The allure of sex was stronger than their fear. Children. Contraceptives existed in the past, but nothing so reliable and ubiquitous as the modern condom. Yes, there were sheepskins, but those were intended for multiple uses, gross, and were literally made out of intestines, also gross. Children were a useful financial investment, but only if you were married and in your own home. And if you were poor and lived in the city, children were a mouth to feed with coin, rather than another farmhand to help you feed yourself. If you were a woman, unable to provide for herself economically, a child would destroy you. Men's reputations would be destroyed for doing such a thing and leaving her with the baby. Property rights and legal issues. A monogamous system is relatively simple compared to a polygamous system or one which encourages free sex. Who gets inheritances? Who has legal rights to the children? So on and so forth. Church control. The church was able to control people based on the powerful urge of sex. It was a crime they could use to convict their enemies, and a sin which they could use to get money from sinners. Wrap up a taboo in layers of unrelated religious dogma and it becomes much stronger because it's associated with the rest of the religion. It's not simply an idea which can change at any time. It's part of a codified belief system which you must subscribe to as a whole or not at all. State control. States could use sex as a tool as well in order to squash political opponents on charges of misconduct and to preserve the status quo. What's interesting is that there are two sorts of fears when you sort them by their solutions.
Technological solution.
The sexual revolution came mostly from these. Yes, attitudes about sex changed, but the catalyst to allow that to happen was technology. Better hygiene, better medical care, better contraceptive options, and to an extent better transportation allowed for more sexual freedom.
Sociological, philosophical solution.
All the others are of this type. There are no inventions that can alleviate the social pressures and proprietarian ideas which contribute to sexual taboo. Or if there are, there's surely inventions like the internet which allow for faster sociological change and greater communication. There are people, including myself, who believe that there is another sexual revolution in the future. A simple contraceptive for men, vaccines for STDs like HIV and herpes, and perhaps a better condom would be the likely catalysts. With the threats of disease and accidental pregnancy eradicated, it would be very difficult for the church, or the state or society in general to continue the idea that sex is bad. After all, what do we communicate in abstinence-only education? Sex can give you diseases and get you pregnant. Eliminate the feasibility of that argument, and you eliminate the main idea propping up taboos in the Western world. Most religions have some sort of rule governing sex, and a lot of religions were used to subjugate a population. Having rules on this natural occurrence help the ruling party as they can claim anybody acting on these urges as immoral and incarcerate them under the name of God. As more people turn away from religion, sex becomes less taboo in a society.